say something. I'm Dave White, by the way. I'm also in my alter ego, Docu Tweacher, which is actually a Gaelic for Dave White. It sounds a bit more sexy when you put it on guitar. What I want to talk to you about, I suppose, is give you a brief history of my making career and my what I call my building style. You can call it as such. Tell you a bit about how it evolved and describe it. And I think I'd also like to sort of demo maybe 3 particular guitars so you can actually hear what they sound like, as well as me saying to you what they sound like, because when we all get in here it gets a bit raucous and we can't sort of fully hear, so this is an opportunity. It's also a shameless opportunity for me to plug my new CD. So, I'm some rough and play some bits from off there. So I'm going to concentrate on 3 when I do it, which is going to be basically this one, which is my 100th that I made. This one, which is quite dear to me, my big boy, which you've been here before and seen. And an earlier one, which I love a lot, and is also interesting because it's cedar maple, which is a slightly different combination of wood. So I want to go a little bit into this. I know there's been debates on the forum recently and everywhere about cedar versus spruce and all the rest of it in terms of types. And I think I'm probably going to try and demonstrate a little bit what Adrian was saying, that the woods are subtle flavours that chef uses, what the maker does. And sometimes you can be very surprised about what you think a wood sounds like, how it actually does sound, and how you do it. So like Adrian, I came to making as a player. I've been playing for about 20, 30 odd years before I even remotely thought about making. I was gradually getting more interested in playing fingerstyle guitar to different sorts of levels, and got heavily interested in Celtic, what people call Celtic style. And I was also getting a bit more affluent, and the guitars I was buying and playing were getting better and better, and I was ending up with things like Loudons, and then I ended up with the McElroy. And having gone to a lot of Martin Simpson workshops in the 2000s, I was surrounded by Sobels all over the place, and my old friend Bill Briskin had a Sobel as well. So I was evolving to the stage when I would have moved on to getting a guitar commissioned and made for me by a luthier. And it would have been one of those English European style guitars, because those are the ones that spoke to me, those are the ones that I'm most associated with the players that I was listening to and being inspired by in terms of doing that sort of music. But then I ended up inventing an alter ego, Docu the Tweacher, and commissioning myself to make it, because I got a lucky break in terms of lifestyle called early retirement and could become a slightly dilettante luthier. But I was always fascinated by what made the guitars work. I'd always been fascinated working with wood. I'd done loads of stuff renovating the house we live in, which also had lots of Douglas fir doors and stuff which are still doors. I only make instruments out of my friends' doors at the moment. And the way I learned, people could call it self-taught, that's a bit of a oxymoron really, or tautology, you can't really self-teach. But I learned from the wonderful, what I describe as open architecture that exists in guitar making, in terms of what people will share on the internet, builders will share with each other, what you can learn from books, what you can learn from other makers. I think we had this debate when we had the Luthiers panel last year. It's such an open environment where people are eager to share new ideas and inventions, rather than grab them in and copyright them and go on a secret. And you can learn a hell of a lot, and it works in a really positive way, because as soon as someone comes out with an idea, someone else will do something with it, lob it back in, and do things you've never thought of, and it pops and pops and it pops. And you know, that was Byrne's idea for the web when it first started, and it's a bloody shame it's gone back into the corporate. It's mine, I've copyrighted it, because it's just such a beautiful area to go. And a bit like you're saying about your European luthiers, the rest of it, it's such a creative and forward, positive thing. So that's how I learnt. There's no way I could have ever been taught, because I'm such a bolshy, learn it myself, so that I would never have survived on one of your courses, Adrian. I don't think I would be off doing my own thing, saying, no, it doesn't work like that, it works like this. Go away and find it doesn't work like that, and come back and find out it works like this. So, and again, I'm with you all the way. nobody should ever be feared of mistakes. There aren't mistakes, there's learning processes. The basic thing is make those learning processes safe so you don't lose fingers, arms, ears, whatever, the things flying around and dangerous machinery doing it. But never, to be my motto, never be afraid to explore, because you learn huge things that you never thought you would learn. Like at some stage I went out to banjo making. I never think banjo making will teach you things that you can bring back into the realm of steel sling, or but you can. It was a fascinating area to go into. So I started making in 2002. Feature string instruments from my alter ego. It was formed in 2004 when I started selling, if big ones was in buying. My ethos has always been, as the player, I make instruments that I want. And if somebody else happens to like them and I can make something sell, that's fine. But essentially, I go down the route of things that, had it been me, oh, I'd want one of them, oh, that's fine, I want one of them, I want one of them. So now rather than save up and go and sell this and so on, to do it, I get the wood, and I go design a plan, do it. My approach is slightly different to Adrian's. He uses CAD, I use lining wallpaper. Roll them all up, stick them away. Works for me. It's the way it goes. So my influence is definitely European. So if I had to talk about, as I said earlier, the sort of guitars that inspired me, it would be something like Sobel, McElroy, Loudon. Can't say file because I never really played many files until I met people here, people like Keith and the rest of it. It wasn't in my, it was more the Loudon, McElroy, that's Sobel, so many when you're at a Martin Simpson workshop, you can't move. I shake a stick at bloody Sobels everywhere. I basically developed my own style in this open architecture environment, almost like osmosis and magpie theft, and then adapting. Because it's basically how it works. You see an idea, you see another idea, because it's so open and people share it. You say, that looks good, let's take those together. Oh, they look good, let's take that. So my style, rather than following plans, I've never ever followed plans. I started off with the Camilliano and Eggs book, which has plans in it, but I didn't do theirs, I designed my own guitar. I think the only instrument I've ever made to a plan, apart from the Hobgoblin kit Appalachian Dulcimer, which is the first thing I ever did make, was under Colin's tutelage making a lute. So I decided if I was going to call myself a luthier, I'd have to make a lute. And unfortunately, you have to follow bloody plans to do that. And that was an interesting process. Colin, can I do this? No, Dave. Oh, no, why did they do that? Why didn't they do that? So that's the only instrument I've ever made to a plan that hasn't been drawn on the back of a piece of wall lining paper by saying that.
That was I drew it on a bit of tracing paper.
You did. Looked like a CAD drawing to me. 15th century probably CAD drawing, but it was very and a bugger. But there you go. So if I'm going to name builders that influenced me, Stefan, not so much for his building, although to start with as a copy, but for his sheer maverick, bloody minds and the way he's ploughed a furrow and did that sort of thing. That this works for me. This is how I'm going to do it. You don't listen. That's been quite an inspiration. But in terms of the way I build, I'd have to cite certainly some of the Americans, Howard Klepper, Mike Dooley, Rick Turner, who do some really interesting things with almost aerospace techniques from when they were doing it early on carbon fibre that some of you have seen in these guitars. Mike Dooley especially is a very interesting builder. If you ever go on his website and find his articles page, he's written a whole host of articles about building. And he's written one on intonation, which is almost like a PhD physics thesis on how a guitar does or doesn't intonate and equal temperaments and all the rest of it. And he's just great. He's wonderful. There's also a guy called Scott Van Linger who divides an awful lot of luthiers. He's the guy that gets inside guitars and rebraces them, and he ignored luthiers because he basically said he could make every luthier's guitar better by shaking around with the braces and doing different things, which is going to piss off any luthier, including me. He says, I'm going to make your guitar better. But I had a long email conversation with him about, he has this thing called sound is round, he has this theory about waves and round sound. But the thing I learned from him was about how there's almost a shamanistic subtlety about when you get to shaping braces, and I'll come on to later about how you, what I would call voice the top, that it is, I come from a bit of a scientific background, so forgive me if you don't understand the analogy, but on the one hand in physics you've got sort of Newtonian and Einsteinian which is all the big things, and then all of a sudden you come down to Schrodinger's cat quantum, where things go weird. Guitar making for doing things like this is definitely the Schrodinger cat, that when you get to thin bits of wood, weird things happen, and very subtle changes can have very important impact. And he taught me a lot of things, although a lot of his theory, I think, is not really scientifically based, but a lot of what he taught me has been hugely useful. And the other guy I would mention is this guy here, Colin, who's been great. I've adapted and nicked part of his neck design that he came up with way back in time. He's very talented. So that's my influences. You'll notice there's quite an eclectic range of instruments I build, and this isn't even half of it because the harp guitars aren't here, the dulcimers aren't here, the banjos aren't here.
Wisens.
The car's not big enough. The old Weissenborns goes to that size out here. Why not? I thought so. Haravan. I put that down to the fact that I got wide musical instruments, and these are instruments I would really like to play. Even in the end, grudgingly, banjo. I've got to learn how to play, and it's now sort of evolving out into another generation, courtesy of Tristan Soom and Roger File. And I visited Holsway Manor last year into this, which is a sort of shoehorning together with a welding torch of a 5-string banjo and octave mandolin or something like that, banjo type thing, which is great. But I also got quite a short attention span, so I tend to go on different tracks. What I have done is taken my style, and what I've always done when I go into these different areas is to see how far the style and principles that form what I do will go when you take them into different instrument types. And so far, they go a very long way. Even on banjo making, in fact, putting carbon fibre rods in the neck of banjos in terms of changing the neck resonance as much as making it stiff, I found had a big impact. I don't know if you can tell about your Victor M, but as you play up and down there's a certain sweetness and evenness of tone as you go up and down. But and again, that came from guitar making into banjo making. So it's very good. So if I take you quickly through what I'd call my defining moments, first off was the sort of Rick Turner, Mike Doom and Howard Klepper, which is the flying buttress carbon fibre braces. I think Adrian talked about having a stiff rim set, which is not slang. It's not a grinder. It may be luthier slang. The idea being that that gives a foundation for the top and back to respond and maybe not dissipate energy. And it also helps structurally having that stiff structure. It's not monocut technically, but it's a stiff structure. There are different ways of doing it. Adrian uses double sides. The carbon fibre buttress braces, which I think most of you know. Let's see, but around as I do it. But basically, they are anchored in the side. Rob's probably got one back there. Maybe you can see into the neck, and they make that whole structure here up to the neck area absolutely rigid once you put those and glue those in place. And then if you use, as I do, reverse curve alignments around top and bottom, what Colin uses solid, but it's a similar thing. You then basically pick that rim up and it is absolutely rock solid and rigid. Also with the flying buttress, you're taking or using the sides and that rim set to actually support the top part where the neck joins, which is going to do that to a guitar on a pin bridge. Classically, the way you deal with that is you put a big transverse brace underneath to give structural support. Hence, people say the upper back area of the guitar is dead. Well, it is. If you put a big brace like that under it, it's going to be dead. But if you do things like this, you can then actually release that upper back area, which I think is a subtle but a very important part of flavouring the sort of sound I want out of a guitar, particularly the complexity you get from upper harmonics and treble notes. If you actually listen to a guitar, play a note and then have it on your lap and feel around and see what's going on, you actually find out that the top upper back is not dead. There's a lot of stuff going on in that upper back area. From that came fingerboard extensions that can go all the way as far up the neck as possible. That I think is important because the sort of sound I'm looking for, I want evenness across strings and up and down the fretboard, as you play up the neck, as you capo. A lot of guitars, I don't know if it's the first test I ever tried in a new guitar, if you capo on some guitars, they sound great, really open, resonant. If you capo them, all of a sudden they lose an awful lot of resonance and die down. The more you support the fingerboard, the higher up, I think the more even tone you get. And equally, and there was Mike Doonan explained it in a very technical article, which I didn't understand, actually putting carbon fibre rods down the neck changes that whole neck resonance frequency and mode, and it will eliminate a lot of what you find normally as dead spots, especially if you make long things like acoustic basses and basses, you tend to get dead spots in there. Just by changing that neck resonance, you can end up with a lot more even response up and down the neck. Voicing, which is the shamanistic bit. The more I make instruments, the more I've come to the conclusion that bracing, the function of bracing, is basically it divides the instrument up into an interesting, in a musical sense, a series of areas that vibrate and respond when the strings are activated. And there is no magic bracing system that delivers different sounds or different results. That I think we had this debate last year that if Adrian gave me his bracing pattern and I gave him mine, and we both tried to make other, like I pretend to be you, make your guitar, you pretend to be me, they'll come out, the one I make in your style will still sound like mine, and the one you make will still sound like yours, because the way we subtly alter and interact in that whole process of shaping the brace, the fine-tuning of the shapes and the bits you sound in, the bits you sound there, even in that totally different pattern, it will still come out like your guitar. So people will tell you this thing about, it's the luthier package. Part of your soul does go into it in that way, and that's why they come out sounding like your guitar, even if you brace them totally differently. So I used to think, yeah, you had to do this bracing, this tapered. If I do it that way and do the sculpting, it's going to sound rubbish. I don't think it's true anymore. I think you can, there's loads and loads of different bracing styles, and it's how you as a maker interact with those and build them. So basically, my voicing process is, I sort of regard a guitar as a drum with strings on it. Once I put braces and start carving, I just hold the top. And basically what I call the voicing, because tuning is a horrible word to use because it implies that there are certain notes and you can somehow home a top into those notes. But if you've got a responsive top and listen to it, there's notes all over the place, because that's what you want in the guitar, because you've got notes all over the place on the fingerboard. It's more that you can feel a response just about everywhere around that top as you go around, which is why I call it a voice rather than a tuning. And it's almost impossible to teach it without actually being in a place with someone with that piece of wood and saying, and even then it doesn't work, because I'll hit it in here and you give someone else and they'll go, what are you talking about? It is slightly mystical and odd and weird, and hence my friend over there wrote me a song called Luthiers Are Aliens, which I've got on the website, and he's probably right. Next major defining moment would be active versus passive back, which again is another debate. I like my instruments to have what I would call an active back, and if I want to make it a passive back, I just stick it against my big belly, and that does the job brilliantly. The idea being that with an active back, the same way as your top is vibrating and responding, a lot of the back's doing a similar thing, and it interacts with the top in doing that. And to me, I can get complexity of sound even more as doing that. The idea of non-responsive is that you put the energy into reflecting the sound forward, so you want a solid back that doesn't do that complex interaction, and then all the top can focus on sending sound out. If you follow that to extremes, you can go down the sort of Smallman route of the classical, where you only end up with that bit at the top that's moving everything else.
Well, that's then you get a banjo, basically.
Well, sort of, and Nigel was explaining it in his Road King things when he came, those of you who were here a couple of years ago, and Nigel came. It's that principle of the solid behind and one bit versus everything doing interesting things. So I like mine to be active, as I say. You can make them passive just by doing that, which maybe I'll try and demonstrate later. Sound ports, as Adrian said, I think they're win-win. It's the best bang for buck, just running all that, taking your Black & Decker out and drilling a hole in your guitar, if you're clever enough, careful enough to do it. Because A, as he says, you get that personal monitor, surround sound of hearing a bit more of what other people hear your guitar. But I also think that the way the actual top breathes with the port is more free and responsive and different than if you port it. And in fact, on some of my instruments, I've come up with bungs. I did one on Brian where you can actually experiment with that, so you can use the sound port and you can put the bung in and try it. And nearly all the ones that I've done with the sound port, I prefer with the sound port. Brian's was an interesting one because I was a bit ambivalent. I actually slightly preferred the sound with the sound port closed on that guitar, but I think you like it with the open.
The more I've used it, the more I like it without the sound port.
Closed, you mean?
Without the bung.
Without the bung, open, okay. But they're interesting areas to explore. So I've gone down lots of different instrument routes. Been through that short section. Right, so my philosophy, there's three basic aspects to making an instrument and what I call skill sets. First and most important to me is musicality. It's a musical instrument, so it has to be interesting in terms of the sound it produces. And that is the biggest thing. That's my number one. Secondly is what I would call playability, and in that I would include it has to structurally be able to hold up, but equally it has to be playable in terms of the way the neck feels, the way the action is set up, ergonomics that Adrian was going into a bit with Manza type wedges and stuff like that, armrests and the rest of it. All of that is about playability. And then finally you have aesthetics, which is up to absolutely everyone to decide what they think is a good aesthetic or a bad aesthetic, because everybody has a different view on how aesthetics work. Philosophies, I'm definitely wood-based. I don't really like shell or anything else. I love wood in all its glory, but like Adrian, it's very tactile material, it's a beautiful material. It's beautiful with all this, what other people might regard as imperfections. They in fact are sometimes the most interesting bits of the wood are the imperfections of the wood, because that's the nature of the material. I'm very much like Adrian, that I'm passionate, and I would go to something like the North American Indians mantra of you take what you need, but you use what you take. So anything that's wasted needlessly or flagrantly makes me very annoyed indeed. So like Adrian, there's millions of bits of wood scattered all over the place, offcuts from other things that either get a bit like Russian dolls. You start with a baritone and this bit becomes maybe a tenor, and that bit becomes a ukulele, and God knows what you do with the rest, and that bit goes in the rosette and that bit goes in head. This bit can go for band. Never ever waste wood, because it is a precious resource, and it actually is a finite resource because we don't do what the old makers used to do. I mean, I do get a bit annoyed when people talk about sustainable woods, because even some of the European woods ain't sustainable, in the sense that if you're not planting the trees and got 2 years, 200-year cycle to when they come back again, sooner or later you will use them all. Sustainability actually means it's going to be there forever, and the usage is such that the new ones are getting planted and getting used. So certainly move away from the ones which haven't got that much time left, but if the European woods tend to get cut down like a lot after the Russia fall down, Berlin Wall fall down. There's an awful lot of forests in Eastern Europe that were pristine, Caucasian, European spruce that have just been taken out on a massive scale. So sustainability, and that Adrian turned me on to the idea of recycling. Wood, using wood you never thought of using before. If you're going to talk about a local wood guitar, I don't think you can get much more local than the tree that grows in your front garden, which some of you saw the flamenco guitar that I brought last year. That was neck, sides, back wood bracing, all from the tree in the front garden. That's pretty local, and that's a stonking guitar. And that's Wilson Cypress, also known as Port Orford Cedar, similar-ish to the yellow cedar you guys talked about. It's an amazing tone wood. It's a brilliant musical tone wood. Right, now I'll try and go into a demonstration. If anyone else wants to come and play some of the other instruments around here, or talk shop with me over the weekend, feel free. But okay, am I doing okay for time? I've got time to play some things, have I?
Yeah, a few minutes, yeah, definitely.
A few minutes, is that what I've got?
Well, okay, one. No, 5 minutes, fine. Go for it.
Just 5? I'm going to play you through things. All right. Okay. This is my docky guitar, which is named after me. You'd probably call it small jumbo. It's the 100th that I made. It's got the mansell wedge, as Adrian was saying, so narrow to wide, it's the same body depth. It's got spalted beech, reclaimed from a firewood pile of a friend. It's got that down there, it's got it there, it's got it in the rosette. It's got Madagascan rosewood back and sides. It's got Cuban mahogany for the neck, which was imported from Jamaica in 1913.
1909.
Was it 1909 from Bob Smith?
Tree came down,
And it's got Madagascan rosewood fingerboard and bridge. It's got Coca-Cola bridge pins, and it's got Cuban mahogany binding. And it sounds. That, which, if I had to describe my sound, and people ask that's probably my sound on the guitar. And I'll very quickly say, to give you a comparison between this and the big boy, which is about the same body size. But this is a curvy waist guitar, so you'd probably call it, as I say, small jumbo, whereas the big boy is a modified dread. And what you find is, although it's got the same body depth, by having a curvy waist, you actually focus in on mids, trebles a bit more, whereas a straighter waist, straighter body, you tend to get a bit more of a bass. So I'll try the same thing on here. Deeper. Deeper sound. Sustain. Complexity maybe, I don't know if you can hear that. And the difference maybe, quickly in the active and that. Do that. Loses a little bit of that interactive ring and just going that way was the back and the top working together, which is why when I play fingerstyle it's nearly always like that with that away. But if you play with the strap and the folk club, even if you've got an active back, it's not going to do it anymore. So